You're listening to KRUSH Performance, your weekly source for sport performance and athletic development information. Get the KRUSH blogs, podcasts, and performance links at KRUSHperformance.com.
And welcome to KRUSH Performance, everybody. I am Jeff Krushell, and if you're new to the show, my background is in exercise science and strength and conditioning and athlete and player development. That is where I really like to hang my hat, and everything that goes along with planning an athlete's journey through the process of reaching their goals and objectives or their potential, whatever that might be. And just for the record, that potential, it is a moving target for sure. If you do things right, you can raise that future potential. And if you do things wrong, unfortunately, we can also lower that. So let's just make sure we're all on the right track. And that's what this show is really all about, helping you achieve your goals in sport. And today is no exception. Listen, the fall is one of my favorite times of year, not just because the weather is changing outside, but because of everything that's going on in sport. It's a massive transition. We have the start of the NFL, the NHL, the NBA seasons are well underway. You have the WNBA wrapping up, the Major League Baseball playoffs. We have college sport now going, all these great things going on in sport. But as athletes enter their off season, or as they get into their competitive seasons, we're embarking on different ends of that journey, right? So today I wanted to talk about the landscape, and I'm really excited to introduce you guys to three of my best sports radio buddies from the network radio days. We're going to talk with Corey Graham, Marc Majeau, and for everybody who's followed KRUSH Performance, Craig Moonen, the former co-host here at KRUSH Performance. If you've been following the show, you'll be very familiar with Moo. We're going to talk to the guys about what's going on in sport. You know, as we work with our athletes, our teams, and our organizations, we really try to have everybody focus on where they're at right now. And again, another reason we like the fall, it's this huge transition depending on whether you're going into your off season or into your competitive season, like I mentioned. But more importantly, we like to talk about where you're going and how you're going to use this next period of time to move towards that goal or even raise that ceiling of potential like I talked about. But one of the big components there is understanding the landscape. I wonder how many young athletes who are aspiring to a college scholarship or to a professional career or to crack the roster on a national team really understand what that world looks like, right? And it's very important that you have that context so you know where you're going and you also know where you're at in relationship to where you want to wind up. And so today I wanted to get the guys on to talk about the world of sport. So here's kind of the lineup of questions. And these guys are sports fanatics, man. Some of my trusted friends when it comes to really knowing what's going on in the world of sport. I want to talk to these guys about the World Series in Major League Baseball and the money parity there. If you're a baseball player or if your goals are professional sports, understanding the business and the entertainment side of professional sports, really important. So I'm going to talk to the guys about that. I also want to go into some general concepts, right? Major League Baseball and the World Series, okay? That is a grind. What is the toughest sport to play? Which sport has the toughest schedule? And I'm also going to ask the guys what they feel is the toughest championship. And then we're going to get into a little bit of personal stuff, and I want you to answer these questions as well. I'm going to ask them what they feel or who they feel is the best athlete in sport, past or present, past and present. How about that? Okay, if we go back and look at the great athletes from the past, who resonates? And then I'm going to give everybody a time machine. And I'm going to ask you and the guys if they were able to go back or even today go somewhere to see an athlete play, who would you want to see play? Like if you're a baseball player, would you want to go back and see Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig? Would you want to go see, Ken Griffey, one of my favorite players? Or would you want to go see somebody like Shohei Ohtani today or Aaron Judge in one of these, baseball cathedrals that we have around the nation today? Or would you want to go back and see an Olympic athlete or somebody inside of your sport? Or is there an athlete you model yourself after that you might want to go see how they operate? For me, I know exactly who I would love to go back and see, and I'll share that with you later on. So today we're going to talk to the guys about that world of professional sport. We're going to get into a bunch of different conversations, and I want you to join in. If you have questions, comments, or smart remarks, write to me. Go to jeffkrushell.com, our website. info@jeffkrushell.com is the email, or direct message me on any of the social medias. On that note, I also want to thank you right now for all the feedback on last week's show, from the rink to the boardroom. It's okay not to be okay. Jason Campo's great story of how he started as a young athlete, battled his way into the world of professional hockey, wound up playing around the world, but how injury and concussion took him out of sport. And he rechanneled his energy in the tech and IT world, and then with the success he saw there, using everything he'd learned in sport, applying that in the world of business, then selling that company and doing quite well, which allowed him to get back into the competitive world of sport again, but in the crazy world of dog sledding, the Iditarod. Unbelievable story, and it's posted now on our website, so you can go back and get that show and all of our past shows. But I want to thank everybody for the feedback there. That does mean a lot to me, that that we're helping people out, and even just in terms of context, right? So without further ado, let's have a look at today's sporting landscape, just to get some context, with three of my good buddies: Corey Graham, Marc Majeau, and the former co-host here at KRUSH Performance, Craig Moonen, the Moonen. Let's get after it. All right, guys. Hey, listen, man, I'm so excited to have you guys here on KRUSH Performance. You know, it's been a long time since the old co-host Moo, Corey Graham, Marc Majeau, since we've all sat down and talked shop. And you know, with the start of the football season, the NBA kicking off, the MLB wrapping up, NHL underway, all the crazy good stuff going on in the world of sport, I thought this would be an awesome time just to get you guys together. In case everybody doesn't know, Craig Moonen, former co-host, longtime co-host on KRUSH Performance. Corey and Marc, we used to work together, man, way back in the day, even before the TSN radio days, right? Some of us. So great to have you guys on. Welcome.
Awesome to be here, man.
Great to be here. It's an honor and a privilege, man. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Oh, God, this is going to be fun. So a bit of a fun show today. You know, guys, on the show, we always talk about the context of sport, right? And I think one of the things that's happening in sport today, especially for young developing athletes, so much pressure to achieve and succeed. And one of the things when I sit down with families, teams, and organizations is, you know, everybody kind of gets caught up in their bubble. And what I try to do every now and then, if this makes sense to you guys, is just sort of take a step back and, you know, talk about the journey of sport performance. And for me, there's two really important key components as we start, you know, an athlete down the pathway of achieving a dream. And one is the destination, right? And most athletes have a destination. They want to play pro sports or get that college scholarship or do something incredible. And so that's pretty good. But I often wonder if the athletes, the families, the teams really understand the context of how incredible sport is right now, right? And then the second most important thing that I find most athletes, even teams and organizations, are missing is that starting point of where they're at, right? And then plotting out that journey. So, you know, with this sort of change of the seasons going into the fall, I thought this would be awesome, man, to talk about some of the great things in sport, just to put it into context for everybody. So we're going to have a really cool day, everybody. We're going to talk to some of my most relied on, trusted sports minds here. We're going to talk about the best players in baseball. And I also want to talk to you guys about payroll parity in the game, and if that's a big issue. I want to talk about the toughest championship to win. We're going to go through the toughest schedule in sport, the toughest sport period. And then also the best athletes in sports. So we're just going to have a great conversation. And guys, no rhyme or reason. We can go in. I'll try to cue it up and keep it organized, but I'm looking forward to this roundtable. So let's kick it off here. Just so everybody knows, I am speaking to three dedicated Yankee fans, and I feel your pain, boys. I feel your pain.
There's only one person I would have agreed to have this chat with 2 days after a humiliating loss, and you are one of them, or you are that person, Jeff. So, like, thank you. This is a safe place, I think. We can share our feelings.
Very safe.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, it was something else. And listen, we are probably about 36 hours away from the final out of Game 5, and there's a lot of stuff I've thought about, but we kind of have to start with that top of the 5th inning, do we not? Yankees up 5-0. Have a chance to get that third out, and then your star pitcher and your first baseman have a little bit of a miscommunication, and the worst possible result happens. The floodgates open, it's 5-5, and I don't know if you guys watching that game, I don't want to say it was over instantaneously, but you felt that stadium just had all the air taken out of it instantaneously, and I knew they were going to have a hard time getting back into it.
Without a doubt, I think. And even before the mishap of the slow roller up first base, I mean, there's 2 errors before that. Like, you could just feel, the Yankees are starting to Yankee it up here a little bit. Like, they had flaws all season long, like, for sure. And if, as fans of the team and you're watching them all the time, I think I said pretty much every second week, like, this is the worst first place team I think I've ever cheered for from Yankee fandom history. Yet they found their way into this series, and you were thinking it was going to be this big heavyweight tilt, and it looked like they had Game 1 wrapped up, right? I mean, that was a done deal, and then then bad things happen, like base running and defense challenges, and like just the inability to get the big hit at the big time. But that team gets on, they're on the mat, right? And it's like, they're probably going to get swept here, and then figure it out. Big hits at big times, big pitching moments, and then they are cruise control up into that 5th inning. Garrett Cole looks like a beast. Yes. And then 2 big errors, and you're looking at, I've never seen, like, I can't remember since like the Atlanta Braves pitching dominant days where I've seen guys on the mound that are throwing pitches that are such high pressure pitches, and Garrett Cole was like emptying the tank there, and he was out of it. He was totally out of it with that slow roller, and then that was it. Like, you're absolutely right. And then and there was just no way they were going to come back after that.
I wouldn't say I'm a huge Yankee fan. I'm a Cubs guy, but I was rooting for the Yankees, basically because of Anthony Rizzo, number one, and watching him be the guy that is part of it. I blame Cole more. Maybe I'm a homer. I don't know, but you got to cover first base. But to see Rizzo, a guy that's got gold gloves and everything, be part of that was. Man, it was hurtful. Like, and he's got broken fingers, so he can't hit. He's not hitting anything all series long. I'm just like, I just wanted him to have one more moment, and it didn't happen.
Yeah. No, it's tough. Hey guys, going into this season, I'd like to just get the playoffs I thought the baseball playoffs were fantastic, right up to the wild card race. I think Detroit was just an incredible story in baseball this year, how they went about their business. And that's it reminds me of like the new modern Moneyball era, right? Just slapping things together and throwing it against the wall, and it worked. So a lot of cool stories in baseball, but getting down to this World Series, I started tracking it right through. 2 of the biggest payrolls in game, these 2 teams, these are the titans of baseball, other than the Mets, other than payroll, but the Mets were there too. They could have done it. But going into the World Series, guys, I had 2 things. I kind of gave the Dodgers the edge just because of their roster. But man, oh man, I don't think I've ever seen a camaraderie, or it's been a long time since I've seen a camaraderie among a team. And I honestly thought that if the Yankees had a chance, it was going to be that camaraderie, man. Those slaps on the backs, those dugout camera shots where, Judge just walking down, goes and gives the catcher a hug, and these guys high-fiving. There was something special there. So after Game 1, I'm going, yes, this is what I was hoping for. And then it just didn't happen. Sport is tough. Baseball is tough, right? So, maybe let's start here, and we'll kind of maybe go around the horn with Marc, then Moo, then Corey. Just looking at these rosters and these great players got me thinking, guys, about, hey, are we looking at a new era of these best players in the game? Because there's a lot of great things going on right now. So, hey, Marc, to start with you. If we were going to talk about historically, I mean, everybody knows the names, but are there baseball players in the history of the game and in the modern era that sort of resonate with you as a baseball fan?
Yeah, I made a list of kind of the top 5 guys that are currently playing right now, and I'm sure we'd all have a really close list. So I have Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout, Aaron Judge, Juan Soto. And then a new guy I want to add to that list is Bobby Witt Jr. What he's been able to do, his season with Kansas City was unbelievable. Any one of those guys I just named, they're so fun to watch. Like I grew up, it sounds weird to say, but I kind of grew up in the steroid era. So like the Maguire, the Sosas, those are the guys that I grew up loving to watch. But what the newer guys are doing, they're not, well, they are bashing balls, but they're stealing bases, they're getting on base. They really do it all. And I feel like the 5-tool player used to be so rare growing up, but now it's common with some of these superstars. Like you look at the guys that are going to finish 3rd and 4th in this MVP voting, they'd be landslide winners a few years ago. So the talent we have in the league right now is unbelievable.
Yeah,
And
incredible
even these
star power,
multi-position
right?
Guys. I don't think we've seen this in a long time in the game, these multi-position guys, right? Hey, Moo, what does your list look like?
Yeah, it's obviously very similar if you talk about the folks that are excelling right now and are front of mind, right? We just saw the most star-studded World Series that I can recall, and if you go through the playoffs, it had all of the Bobby Witt Juniors, it has the Bryce Harpers and the Trey Turners, and like it's crazy. But the ones that stand out for me are the ones that seem to be able to get it done in the big moment too, and we saw a lot of that, and some we didn't see that we expected. If you think about what you saw guys like Juan Soto do in big moments, and then if you think about a guy like Mookie Betts, it's crazy to me what from an athlete perspective that guy can do. He is a ridiculous at bat. It's super hard to get out. I've never seen somebody play right field defense like he does. Like he makes it look so easy. Like he's in a completely different place, completely different level. And then, oh, by the way, yeah, we need a second baseman and a shortstop today. Like, could you just come in and do that at like MLB elite level on one of the best teams in the league? He blows me away. And he does it wearing like 27 pounds of gold chain. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And my list is obviously pretty similar to your guys's as well. And, I'll say I'm probably of the four of us, I'm not the biggest baseball fan in this group. I'm more of a casual guy. I watch here and there, and definitely in the playoffs, obviously. But it's amazing just even watching, casually how much better it's gotten in the last few years and how much some of these players and what they can do. And you guys mentioned the multi-position stuff is amazing. Juan Soto is one of my favorite players to watch. Like that at bat he had in the LCS where he stares down the pitcher and he's telling him, like, just the way the mental mind games too. I mean, we can talk about athleticism all you want, but the mental makeup of some of these guys it's unbelievable. And it just adds another layer, and all the other stuff going on, whether it's social media outside of the field or outside the clubhouse, whether it's fan interference in baseball games, it just seems like nowadays something weird is going to happen no matter what.
Yeah, it's great. Some real cool stories. One of my favorite stories, I think, of the World Series, guys, just going into it, Anthony Volpe, right? So it was the story of 2018 or something, guys, correct me on the dates, but he was a 9-year-old kid at the Yankee parade watching his team when Jeter, of course, was a shortstop, and they had a picture of him with his mom and his dad with his Yankee hat and his Yankee jacket at the parade when he was 9 years old, and here he is, man, playing for the Yankees. I love that stuff, guys. What a great story. But just as we wrap this up, I think you're right. I mean, we can easily determine some of the great players in the game right now. But going back in history, man, this thing was Shohei. I love this for baseball as a whole, like baseball globally, pitching and hitting, man. And I really do believe, I think you have to go back really to Babe Ruth, right, to really see somebody impacting the game on both positions. Madison Bumgarner, was hitting bombs there for a while, so that was kind of cool, but not playing a position. So there are some cool things, but I love the idea of these multi-tour players. I hope that really does resonate and change the youth development. But guys, one big question, and we'll go around the horn here, Marc, Moo, and Corey. How do the Red Sox let go of Mookie Betts? Like, it's haunting me, guys. Like, listen, I don't really have a team. If I were going to hang my hat, I'd be rooting for the Blue Jays. But boy, we got another 20 years of agony ahead of us, I feel. But I look back, the Red Sox coming off of, finally breaking, the curse of the Bambino, have one of the greatest talents of our generation, and they let him go. And behind the scenes, Corey, you and I were talking before the show. I realize it's not easy, but there's no salary cap here, right? And I don't understand it. Any thoughts on that, or I guess maybe similar stories, Marc?
Well, as a Yankee fan, it's great. I don't have to see Mookie Betts 14 times a season, so that's nice. But when you think about what the Red Sox have done since the turn of the century, right? Think of since the year 2000. That is a license to print money, especially after 2004. The amount of money that has been generated from that franchise, winning, I think, 4 World Series titles, and then they start counting pennies after they win their 4th one. Like, it makes no sense whatsoever. When you're one of those big teams, you should be able to spend like one of those big teams. And I don't understand the logic to letting that guy go, because when you let a guy with that caliber go, you instantly are looking for a replacement for him. And there is no other Mookie Betts. You had that guy. You had that piece of a championship puzzle, and then you let him walk because you didn't want to pay him. If you let those guys walk, who else are you, like, if I'm a player for the Red Sox, if they're not going to pay that guy, why are they going to pay me? So it made no sense to me that they made that move, other than they just want to save some dough. But they've made so much money since 2004. Like, they have become a top 3 or 4 franchise in the last 20 years. And I still don't understand why they made that move.
Yeah. Hey, Moo, do you think it's possible that Mookie wanted out? I can't think of another reason.
I don't think so. I remember when that was happening, and obviously we were following it super closely because we wanted him to leave. Like that, I didn't want him in the division at all.
Oh, you Yankee fans!
But if you think about the Sox in general, it almost is like they just decided to switch philosophies halfway through. They're like looking around and they're like, well, they're playing in a division with the Tampa Bay Rays, who are doing amazing things with nothing, and like, we could do that, and maybe we could save some money and we could still win. Like, other people are doing it. But that sounds like a thing that like the middle to small market teams do in baseball, not the Sox. Like, they're worth so much money. And maybe the other factor there was, well, we've won a few. So we've bought a lot of street cred and fan cred. Like, we're good for a bit. And they won a lot, actually. Like, they won more than I'd like to admit. And maybe all of those things piled together allow you to be, okay, it's fine. We'll just buy Mookie Betts back later or something. Like, I don't know, but he is like a one of one kind of a player. Like, they just don't come around. You don't replace that player. So it's still pretty stunning. But every team's going to have that moment. Yankee fans are right now like, oh man, like, what is Soto going to do now? And what? Like, so every team at some point has this moment, but like, he's a special guy.
Yeah. Hey, Corey. So with you kind of being, real deep in hockey, the only parallel I can kind of think here is the Gretzky trade, because this wasn't a free agency, hey, I'm going to move on type thing. This was a legit straight out trade, man, for cash and whatever prospects.
Yeah.
So, is there another, and again, this might haunt, Red Sox fans forever, but is there another comparable move that a team has made that was just absolutely on the surface horrific? Maybe the Gretzky move? I don't know.
I mean, yeah, that one jumps out. I wouldn't call Mookie Betts like Wayne Gretzky type. He's pretty good, but he's not the greatest player ever, right? But I'm with you, right? Like, I do feel what you're saying. Although the Oilers did win the championship the next year, or the 2 years after that trade, so they didn't, necessarily fall right down. It just, for me, it's sometimes like these smart people that think they're smart analytically get in and start making decisions not based upon what they see, but what the research shows. And a guy approaching 30, well, he's going to start diminishing. Let's get rid of him. I mean, the guy's still at the top of his game. Why? Like, I don't know. Put the math aside at points, like, you have one of the best players in the game. Why are you trying to get rid of him? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. And Crusher, if I can just jump in, there's another trade that didn't happen, but I think would have been catastrophic. Probably about 15 or so years ago, the Lakers came really close to trading Kobe Bryant. And they were negotiating with a couple teams. Yeah. I believe until Jerry West came in and said, well, like, what are we doing? Like, no, put the phone down. We're going to work this out with Kobe and we're going to figure things out. So that was another one that could have been a disaster for Laker fans. But all it took was one guy coming in and saying, guys, let's just pump the brakes. Let's figure this out. And let's not trade our future Hall of Famer that's going to have a statue outside of our arena. Let's try to let's exhaust all our options first.
No, great conversation, guys. And I love this conversation for a couple of reasons. One, again, just it's kind of fun to hypothesize what's going on behind the scenes because we don't know all the factors. But for any athlete that's going into this world, you have to understand there's so much out of your control, no matter how good you are, right? So this is where it's kind of gotten self-centered, and good and bad athletes, it's a commodities market. It's guns for hire, right? It's a value commodity market in pro sports. And you have to realize if that's your dream, somebody's got to play, but you have to be ready for that kind of world. But however, guys, I don't think the earning potential can be matched anywhere else on the planet than in professional sports, and probably baseball leading the way here. The Shohei Ohtani contract, $700 million. The Dodgers, sort of massaging that and making it work for the next, 100 years or whatever. I don't know. It's
massage, crazy. That's a good word. Yeah.
but let's talk about the payrolls, right? And I watch this every year, and Moo, this goes back to when you were on the show. When we get to the MLB playoffs, because there's no hard cap, it's such a crazy disparity between the bottom teams and the top teams. The Mets this year, $313 million, right in there. $334 million last year, the highest payroll ever in the history of baseball. And then you have, the Oakland Athletics this year at $69 million. There's two pitchers on the Yankees that make more than that, I think, for God's sakes. So let's talk about this. Would you guys like to see parity in the league? And what do you think about the player salaries? Juan Soto, I believe, is probably going to become the highest paid player probably in the history of sport, because he's going to have a $600+ million contract, I think. I don't think it's going to be 10 years. I think it's going to be 7 or 8. I don't know for sure, but Juan Soto is set to potentially become the highest paid player in the history of the game, maybe of all of sport. What do you guys think about the money side of baseball, Marc?
Well, it's fascinating because I took a look at the payroll numbers from last season in 2023. And in the World Series, it was the 4th highest payroll up against the 21st highest payroll, right? Texas versus Arizona. And the top 3 payrolls actually missed the playoffs in 2023. Right. But then in 2024, the top 6 made the playoffs, and the World Series matchup was the 5th highest salary versus the 2nd highest, in the Dodgers versus the Yankees. You know what? I think what's kept things interesting is that 3rd wildcard spot. Because you look at certain teams saying, why should I spend $300 million to lose to a team that's spending $110 million, right? Like you look at Detroit, made the playoffs this year, a team you mentioned. They were 26th in payroll. Yeah. So I do think owners do take a look at that, saying, let's just scale things back a little bit, because, Moo, you mentioned the Tampa Bay Rays. They always find a way to do it. And maybe that's what the Red Sox were trying to copy a little bit, saying like they're able to do it with nuts and bolts and all this kind of stuff. So yeah. I think salaries is always going to be a big deal, but I think that 3rd wildcard team just keeps so many more teams in contention. No one wants to sell with that 3rd team, with that 3rd spot either, because you can be in it. Heck, the Mets were 11 games under 500, and I want to say July, and look at the run that they went on and went pretty deep into the playoffs. So these numbers are going to go high, and I agree with you on Juan Soto, man. He's 25 years old, and he's coming off a heck of a dress rehearsal. That number is going to be high, but I do think some of these owners and some of these salary caps, there is an internal cap, because with the luxury tax, with the Cohen tax, right, what the Mets may have to pay, I think owners are looking at and saying the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. I think especially when you see the kind of run that a Detroit Tigers can go on, I mean, they were lights out hot all the way down the stretch in the summer. Nobody wanted to play them. And you got ownership and management in many of these teams saying, like, holy, wait a second, maybe we don't got to go $40 million on somebody. We could go the other route. And so I guess at the end of the day, the thing that's cool about baseball specifically is that because of the way that the salaries work here, it allows you, and in some cases forces you, to build your team in completely different ways. And that's less the case in other sports where you everybody has to get to a certain number, and then you can only have so many superstars, and you're looking for lightning in a bottle. But like a Detroit team, it has to rely on like growing their talent homegrown and everybody coming up at the same time. And the Baltimore Orioles are the perfect example of that. Brutal. Wait, oh, there's something happening here. Maybe next year. And then all of a sudden, boom, they're there, right? And I think the super spend teams, they can, in quote unquote, buy their way out of that problem, or they can try to accelerate their way out of that. It doesn't always work. I love the idea of the wild card allowing more and more of that homegrown different ways to win chance in there. And you see a good mix. You see a good mix of like high volume and low volume salary in the World Series. But I do think at the end of the day, there's still this argument. And I think true baseball fans probably have this perception of like, yeah, in baseball, you can just buy a championship, right? Because there's still this feeling like the evil empire or the Dodgers are doing it. And I don't know if that's necessarily true, but you do have to go back a pretty long way to look at a World Series champion that wasn't a high payroll. Like probably Kansas City would have been the last one where you're like not over 100 million for sure.
Yeah. And then you guys go back to when Florida Marlins won their World Series. I think they were the second lowest payroll. They played the Yankees that year.
Yep.
The Yankees had, I think they were the highest payroll in baseball, like 105 million back in the day. But Florida was like second last or last with like, I'm pulling this out of my butt, but like 60 million or no, less than that. It was way less than that. But yeah, it's crazy, right? The cool thing is, you don't have to have these big payrolls. And you're right, Tampa. Baltimore has been a Krush team to watch here for 5 years. Cleveland is always there. There's these teams with lower payrolls. Kansas City's another one. But the Tampa Rays, man, are a haunting team for a lot of organizations. Corey, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's really interesting in baseball because there's the discrepancy is so big between these major markets and the smaller ones. And like you said, there's no salary cap or any equalization or anything like that. I mean, yeah, luxury tax, but what does that matter really if you have the money? I kind of like it at times, but then why would you be a fan of like the Pittsburgh Pirates where you get these homegrown stars, you build them up, and then as soon as they can, they leave. And they got the pitcher this year. How long is he going to be there before he moves on? It's like you kind of feel like you're a farm team for other teams. And sure, you catch lightning in a bottle and win, make a run every once in a while, but it's so hard to have any staying power. Like Moneyball was great, but it never ultimately won in Oakland. Never. Yeah, right. Like it never got the World Series title, and yeah, it's just I like it at some point because there are different paths, like you said. In other sports, it feels like there's a blueprint which you have to follow, and in baseball, you can go in a crew, bring in all these big name players. So that doesn't necessarily work in the NFL. I think of teams that struggled historically, went and spent a bunch of money and brought in a bunch of players, and they're still at the bottom of their division. Doesn't seem to matter. Sorry, Marc. In baseball, there are different ways, and you can kind of see it go different ways,
Boy, the Dodgers are an organization to watch, though, because I think they do really good things internally. I know they do. They also have ownership that's not afraid to pay the money. They're going to go after Soto. If they get Soto, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be interesting. But Corey, one question for you, though, before we move on to our next topic, which is the toughest championship to win. That's coming up next year. But before we go there, Draisaitl, I believe, highest paid player in the NHL right now, yeah?
I think so,
yeah.
First or second, yeah.
Yeah. So you look at Draisaitl's contract. Let's talk about that compared to, let's go to Ohtani. $700 million for 10 years. $70 million a year, essentially, is what Ohtani's going to get paid. And Draisaitl in a sport like hockey, boy, oh boy, I'm telling you, that's a massive sport-to-sport discrepancy.
Yeah, I don't imagine a lot of NHL guys are hanging out with athletes from other sports at times because as much as they outpace all of us, they can't keep up, right? Like, some of these guys are incredible. And you go to the international sports like soccer or F1 racing, and just the money is unbelievable. The NHL's coming along, but I think it also shows like they're the only league that has 7 franchises in Canada, right? Like, and without those Canadian funds coming in, like where is hockey in the States? Sure, there's some great markets, but it's not number one in a lot of those markets. So the money just isn't really there. I mean, it's there up here. I mean, the Oilers can print money. They can they can charge whatever they want. They can bring in as much money as they want, but they can only spend so much. So it's really kind of unique and interesting. But I think it just shows how important it is up here in Canada. But if it was that important in the States, hockey would be off the charts.
Yeah, you're right. Hey guys, I'm going to change the schedule a bit. I wanted to talk about the toughest championship next, but I'll maybe change that because of the way the conversation's going. Let's talk about this because we're talking about international sports, F1, soccer, rugby, the tennis. There's great money there. There's great money in golf as well. Tough sports. Let's talk about maybe the toughest schedule in sport, right? I mean, because these players are under the gun. I mean, you're getting paid for your skill, not necessarily paid for what you're about to embark on, right? So if I were to go around the horn, starting with Marc again, if you were to sort of have an opinion on the toughest schedule, the toughest demand on the athlete in sport, what would you say, Marc?
Well, I've thought about this a lot, and it might be a little strange, but I think it's the NBA, just based on the average size of the athlete. So I did a little research, and the average height of an NBA player is 6'6", 220 pounds. Now, I'm 6'2", and I hate to get on airplanes. I know these guys are certainly not flying commercial the way that we all do, but when you think about the wear and tear of getting on airplanes, getting in and out, trying to stay in hotel rooms for 41 nights out of the year, just think about what that does to a body. Like, how does Joel Embiid get a good night of sleep? How does Victor Wembanyama, 7'3", get a good night of rest when he's on the road, not in his home? So while I get it's only 82 games, 41 on the road, I just think about the wear and tear that puts on a body, how many flights you have to go through in a year, and then add on 4 rounds of 7-game playoffs. I think it's the NBA just based on the size of the athlete.
I never thought of that.
What do you think?
Yeah, now all I can think about is Wembanyama trying to sleep in a hotel room.
Yeah.
Like, did you get 2 beds and put them end to end or something? How does that
It's
even
like Andre
work?
the Giant at times, man. Like, it's so hard.
Yeah, I didn't have that on my list, actually. I was kind of the extreme, in my head, at the extreme end of the spectrum is either like a baseball kind of schedule where you play like every day, every single day for like 6 months. And yeah, it's not as physically intense of a sport, maybe you wouldn't argue, versus like the NFL where you can literally only play 1 game a week because you need 6 other days for your body to heal if you're lucky. So, but I think I'll stick with baseball because of this idea of the grind, and maybe because of my personal experience. I've never played in the NFL, and I'm brutal at football, and I'm not good at baseball either. But even just playing in like weekend tournaments, it's a weird stop-start kind of a sport. Like, you're doing nothing for like a whole lot of time, and then all of a sudden you got to be like 110% out, and that wears you down over time. So I'm going to go just like volume, quantity. That's my lane.
Yeah, I think both of those are good arguments. It's funny. I was thinking, Mark, about your point about basketball players. There's a hotel in Portland right near the arena where the Trailblazers play, and their beds are longer. Like, they have they have more room because that's where the NBA teams stay, and like the showers are higher. So like they do have some of that a little bit. But yeah, it's a good point of traveling that much. And Moo, obviously, with the day-to-day in baseball, yeah, I mean, you're at the ballpark every day, literally every day. If you're not on a plane, you're at the park. So that's huge. I went with the NFL just because of the crazy schedule nowadays. But like, some teams are playing 3 games in 11 days, and these Thursday night games get mixed in. And like, where's the recovery time for that? And that'd be more for you guys, Moo and Krush, because the recovery time is, it just sounds terrible for me. You guys know more about it, but how do you get your body ready to go? And I think we've seen some of these Thursday night games where you don't know what's going to happen. Like, the best teams can look brutal because they're not ready to go. They're not recovered. And then throw in the fact their contracts aren't guaranteed. So, when bad thing happens, and all of a sudden you're out of a job and you're out of an income, and now what?
Yeah. Okay, guys, all valid points. I have to go with baseball as well, not because that's my world. And I was with of course, with the Blue Jays, I've been there. I just think, because you do have to consider the physical pounding, right, of NHL or, the NFL. The demands in NBA are tough, though I will say this, and I'll try to get Marc on. So we had Marc Hendrickson, right, came to the Blue Jays. He's kind of like a Jordan guy, was playing in the NBA, had some great contracts, but then he was one of those kind of like 10-day contract guys, bouncing around a bit, played baseball as a kid. So he came to us as a minor league player and worked his way up and had a great stint in the big leagues. But I remember when he got up to, I think, AA or AAA, working through, he goes, "Krush, listen, man." He goes, I thought the NBA was tough, but, and of course he was in the minor leagues at the time. So they're not flying, chartered planes or anything. These are long bus rides or commercial flights, right? He goes, this schedule, he says, I never dreamed it could be anything like this, right? And guys, I've been lucky enough to be asked to go down and present to some organizations. So a couple of years ago, the Angels had me down to talk about exactly that, Corey, recovery, regeneration. And I was just breaking down their season. And that year, I just got the data up here. They were They were fourth in Major League Baseball for miles traveled, and there's no other sport that even compares. They traveled 41,440 kilometers that year, and that was fourth in the league. The Mariners were the highest at 48,000 kilometers. But then I went over the number of time zones they cross over the course of a year, the number of days on the road as opposed to home, and then even their days off. Most of their off days, I think they only had like 4 true off days where they were at home in California. The other travel days, or the other off days, were travel days. So they're on the plane at noon. So, man, that baseball schedule, I think it's just really, really tough, guys, to argue that that's not maybe the toughest schedule in sport. And though the sport isn't all that crazy demanding, oh my gosh, that travel and being away from home, it is really tough. So that brings me back full circle to the next question. What is the toughest sport to play? A very different conversation, right? Baseball, maybe NBA, you might have arguments for the toughest schedule, but the toughest sport. And Moo, if you remember, back in the day, we've had this conversation before. Our conversation was the toughest thing to do in sport. The question today to you guys is, what do you feel the toughest sport is?
Well, one that we haven't really chatted about so far in this conversation, jumps to mind for me is combat sports.
Yeah.
Not any other sports. There aren't any other sports where someone's trying to punch you in the face while you're trying to punch them in the face. So there's no way to really prepare for getting punched in the face. I think it's that old quote from Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So when you think about the training to keep yourself in tip-top shape, you're trying to play this chess game with your opponent going back and forth while they're trying to knock your head off. So thinking about all the moves that go into combat sports, that's the one that jumped out for me. Whether it's boxing, whether it's MMA, all that stuff, it seems like it'd be really tough to do.
I literally had the same thing at the top of my list. You think about the word toughest, and as soon as we're starting to talk about people like literally trying to knock you out cold, that's the objective here. I can't imagine there's anything tougher than that. But then I started thinking, oh, wait a minute, maybe I have a different lane here. So I'm going to throw this out. Could be controversial. Let's see where it goes. So here's my logic. If you go around the globe and you gather up a selection of human beings that are big, strong, maybe mean, in general, not afraid to be in some kind of a fight, and you put them in a corner and you said, all right, what is the likelihood that somebody from this group could jump into the ring, any ring, I'm going to say boxing, MMA, doesn't matter, and could survive a round? So if you think about it that way, that doesn't mean these people are not tough. They are insanely tough. But is the sport tough if they could survive a round against the best versus take another group of human beings, very athletic human beings, hand-eye coordination, speed, agility, strength, all the things that you think, and then put them in a group and say, all right, I'm going to take that person, and of all this group of people, could anybody get on skates and deke Victor Hedman and then go top shelf on Vasilevsky? I'm thinking the percentage is going down. Or could they return Rafi Nadal's serve for a point? Like, could that happen? And I'm starting to wonder if that makes it the toughest sport, not tough like you could survive getting punched in the face multiple times. So anyway, I went that lane, and for that reason, I kind of talked myself out of combat sports from that logic. And I'll leave it out there. Talk amongst yourselves.
I think that's a really good point.
So no, hey, I love that move. So did you with that line of thinking, and I'll share mine with you guys too here, but did you come up with a toughest sport with that kind of mindset?
Yeah, I think where I landed was hockey, because of the factor that even most humans that you would pluck out off the globe wouldn't be able to stand up on hockey skates at all. And even the ones that grow up with it, like in Canada, just about everybody's on skates at some point. You put them into a situation where there's like professional NHL level caliber talent, to go and be anything close to proficient is just about impossible.
Yeah, I had combat sports too as my number one, but I like your lane of thinking. And I was also thinking, and maybe it's not necessarily physically, but the mental side of things, and maybe it's recency bias from the baseball game, but is there a sport where you have more time alone in your own head when you're not doing anything than baseball? Like, you think about Aaron Judge dropping that ball, and he's sitting there in center field all by himself now with every eye on him, every camera's on him. He's just gotten through this huge slump that he's been going through. Like the mental side of that, like how many people can sit there and then make that next play? I don't know.
Tough. Great take on that, man. I love this. This is why we're having this conversation, guys. So great. So I went I kind of copped out. I'm not going to lie. So I looked at this two ways, kind of like Moo. I'm going, okay. And I was with you, Marc, on my list. If we're looking at like physical, man, even mental, can you imagine the nerves before you're about to step into the ring in a title weight match or in a MMA bout where you could potentially get really hurt? That's tough. But then my mind started to wander kind of like Moo's, and I'm going, okay, the team sports, I feel, and that's why MMA and the boxing combative sports, you're on your own there. There's nobody else that can help you. The team sports, you can always cheat a little bit and rely on a teammate to get you going. You guys, I'm not going to lie to you. We just started this crazy golf program. It's actually pretty cool. It's to help, golfers, elite golfers, but also, the average golfers, guys who love the game to, take 10 strokes off their game, just doing it right. Golf is why is that so hard? Like, but you're on your own. You got a ball that's stationary. You get to hit it with a club and you got to send it in a direction, and it's an impossible task, right? So I kind of went down the road of the individual sports. I kind of had combative, but my toughest sport, guys, was golf because it's just unforgiving. And you see the pro guys even just coughing it up. And there's very, very, well, I won't say that. You know who the good golfers are, but there's such a flux at the top of the game who could win in any given day. It's interesting. So anyway, that's a discussion open, man, but what a great discussion, right? So that's the way I looked at it. The individual sports where you have to rely on yourself, kind of like baseball, right? At some point, it's you and the ball. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's fair. That's something I hadn't really thought of, but when you summed it up, when you think about all that goes into it, and a lot of it too, relying on the elements too, right? It's whether the wind is blowing, whether you have to tee off with an audience to your left or to your right. You have cameras tracking you all the way. I don't know if anyone's had the chance to catch the Netflix documentary Full Swing that follows golfers around for a season, but it's really fascinating because you see the top of the top, but you also see the guys at the lower end who, you talk about tough travel schedules as well too. They're in a different city every few days, but you see what those guys struggle to do because if you don't perform, you don't get paid. And you also have to pay for your caddies and your travel, all that kind of stuff. So when you think about the pressure that is on one individual player to hit a tiny ball 300 yards into an even like slightly larger hole, that pressure is, yeah, like it's ridiculous.
Who thought of this crazy human punishment, right? Oh, it's nuts. It's nuts. Well, there were some great golfers, guys. So that brings us to our next topic, guys. The best athletes. Okay, so just coming off of baseball, I just want to share this with you guys. In my time with baseball, I have two really great experiences, actually three early on as a young strength coach. And I'll just share them with you guys. My first time when I moved up to the big leagues, my first time at Camden Yards, we walked through in Baltimore and Cal Ripken was the only guy on the field taking ground balls at third base. I walked out, guys, and I had goosebumps in places there shouldn't be goosebumps. I'm just telling you. But I remember it clear as day. It was like a field of dream moment, man. There is Cal Ripken. I just stood there. And he was the only guy in the field. Grounds crew guys were in the back. He was taking ground balls. We got there early. Oh, my gosh. Awesome. Second big moment for me in my professional baseball as a strength coach was getting towards the end of a spring training. I think in my second year in the big leagues, Pedro was pitching for Boston, and he was getting ready for the season. This was his last spring training start. He went 5 innings. 5 no-hit innings. The guys were coming in to the dugout going, there's no chance. Like, there's absolutely no chance. We had great hitters back, Delgado, and we had Batista. We had great hitters, Jose Cruz Jr., Tony Batista. We had some great hitters in the game at that time. They came in shaking their heads. We got to see this all season. We're done, man. Like, he was lights out, and I honestly just sat there for 5 innings and watched. He was just poof, poof. The guys couldn't touch him. Absolutely could not touch him, which was phenomenal. The last one, guys, for me that was really kind of as a, baseball fan as a kid, was with the time we played this guy right here, man. This guy right here.
The kid.
Junior. So I'm wearing that shirt today to honor him. I loved how he approached the game. But when we played them early in spring training one year, the team rallied around this guy. You could just see how he just brought the whole team up, man. It was just fascinating to watch. So I think that kind of got me thinking about who would be for you guys, maybe the best athlete in sport, period. Like for any reason. So let's go around the horn, Marc. Did you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, the two that jumped out for me, one is before my time, but one of my favorite YouTube highlights to pull up is Bo Jackson. To play two sports at an elite level at the same time is pretty ridiculous. And when you think about the injury that ended his football career, how it only could have happened to that player because he was so strong. So that's the one that jumps out to me. And for one that's going, I don't want to kick off the greatest of all time debate in the NBA, but I think what LeBron James is doing, he's about to turn 40 years old. And when you think about what he's done to keep his body in tip-top shape since the very beginning, the amount of resources he spends with nutritionists, with chefs, massage therapists, all that stuff to make sure he is ready to go. He's never really had a super serious injury that's made him miss any amount of super long time either, right? This is year 20 for LeBron, and he's played a lot of games in pretty much every one of those seasons. So I think about what LeBron has been able to do with that wear and tear. Everyone's going at him every single night, right? When you're LeBron James, you're never getting anyone's C effort. Everyone wants to go up and stop you. So think about what he's done his entire career and what he continues to do now. It's really, whether you love him or hate him, the fact that he's playing at a high level at this age and that size, to me, is just absolutely just remarkable.
Yeah. Wow. Agreed.
Full on. LeBron is a beast, and he's still doing it. It's crazy to me. When I thought about this topic, I try to rationalize it with, like, if we're gonna call you the best, it's got to be that you're defined by dominance. Like, you're dominating your peers in your moment. It can't be that, like, I can't compare what Lou Gehrig did to what's happening now. I got to think about right now in a space who dominates their peers. And you get a few names that come to mind, and you can list them all off in all the major sports. But the one that I've never been able to shake is watching Michael Phelps swim. Yeah. This guy was unbelievable in every competition at the highest level at the Olympic Games over multiple years. Like, we're talking every 4 years. You're lucky to go to one Olympic Games in your life. And it seemed like every time he was in, and every race he was in, he was the favorite. Even the ones where he probably wasn't supposed to win, I remember that. And then I think what blows me away more is not that he's like doing poker ads and stuff now, but like after he all kind of gets out of the sport and you start learning about the mental challenges, the mental health challenges that he had to endure, with so many other Olympians, like it blows me away. To me, best. And to swim is, everybody learns how to swim, but you cannot swim like that. It is so hard.
I'm bowing because I swim like a tugboat, guys. You can honestly probably surf in front of me. I'm not lying. No, total respect. Good call. Hey, how about you, Corey?
Yeah, I had Michael Phelps written down too. I don't know if there's an athlete that had his body built more for the sport he chose. Like, He's the perfect body to be a swimmer, and not just swimming, but like all the different disciplines in that swimming. I mean, it wasn't just he was dominant at one thing; it was all of them. It's incredible. But for me, I'm with Marc here. Bo Jackson. As a kid, like, this guy was my hero. I freaking loved watching Bo Jackson. He did some things. Now, honestly, it wasn't the longest time, and he was never the number one player in his sport. And I wonder if it's because he just didn't really seem to care. Like, he just did it because he was good. He never practiced. He didn't think he needed to. He was so naturally gifted and strong. Like, and he's kind of, there's a book by Jeff Pearlman called The Last Folk Hero, and it's so accurate that he's kind of the last guy that there's not a ton of tape on. Like, yeah, there's YouTube clips here and there, but some of the best stories about Bo Jackson, there's no cameras around for. So you're not sure if they're real. Did he jump over a Volkswagen? Maybe. Some people say he did. Did he save a plane from going down when he was with the White Sox? Maybe. Did he pull a lock off a keg so everybody could drink afterwards? Apparently he did. Like, there's so many things about this guy that he did, and then he just disappeared. Like, he just went quiet for years and sort of got back a little bit with the archery and stuff. But he's such a fascinating person, and I mean, the only guy to be an all-star in both sports and all that stuff. I mean, Dion was great too, but I mean, Bo just had so much power.
Yeah. And if I could just throw something back at this group as well, we didn't chat about this, but which athlete has the best highlight reel? If aliens were to land today and you had to show them 90 seconds of an athlete, who would you pick? Because it might not be the most dominant, but you think about Barry Sanders highlights are so much fun to watch.
Right.
Krush, like Ken Griffey Jr. highlights are so much fun to watch. I'm curious if I'm putting you guys on the spot, but who has the best highlight reel?
Ooh, on the spot, man. If listen, I got to go back and maybe I don't know if my mind is getting swayed in a direction there, but if you put together a Bo Jackson highlight reel for 9, if you were going to share with this generation a highlight reel, if kids saw a Bo Jackson highlight reel, I think that would blow you away. There's just so much there, right? I don't know. I'll think about it. Go ahead, Moo.
If we're going to stay in baseball,
Any
the
sport.
thing that I go down the rabbit hole with every time it comes up on my feed is the Ichiro Suzuki highlight reel. The stuff that dude does off the field, even with a baseball, is ridiculous to me. I remember going really, really early. We went and watched the Yankees play the Mariners, and we got there as soon as the doors would open because I wanted to see Ichiro BP. And like, he was not known as a home run hitter, but at any moment he had this methodical way of going through batting practice where he would put a baseball in like literally every spot in the field in order, and every single time. Like, he was unreal, and he could throw like I've never seen. That I think he was 50 pounds soaking wet. He was tiny. He could run. Like that highlight reel, and that kind of stuff blows me away. Like, and I love 70 home run type stuff, but like the thing that he did on a baseball field and could do and still does. He's 50 years old. You watch highlights of him throwing in Japan and stuff. He's unbelievable. I love him so much.
Yeah, I remember, like, I used to think Ichiro looked like he batted with a tennis racket. It was so big, and he would just kind of make contact, and the ball would explode. And it's like he didn't even swing. It's just like the elasticity of his bat was incredible. It was fun to watch. Other guys that jump out are, for me, Michael Jordan. I mean, you watch some of the things he did, jumping from the foul line and just the competitiveness and moving the ball in midair. I love his videos. And Mario Lemieux. I know we always talk about Gretzky and McDavid, and those taking nothing away. But Mario seemed like another guy that kind of cared at times, but when he wanted to, man, he would make everybody look silly. Like, just his reach, his strength, his power. The way he moved the puck, and again, because he was 6'4" or whatever, a big man in a day where they weren't that big, that it never looked like he was giving his all, and he just destroyed people.
Oh, that one's hard to beat, you guys. No, Marc, that's a great curveball you've thrown at us here, man. So, Corey, you kind of mentioned it, and I'll just say this. I'll put it out there for everybody to think about. But I know the guys down at the Oilers fairly well, and in McDavid's rookie year, they invited me down for the rookie game. So I was up top with everybody looking down, and I hadn't seen him play yet. And so this would be the first year I think he went into the NHL. But in the rookie game, you guys know how it goes. It's like 2-on-2. They have different periods. It's shorter. It's a little more fun. But I saw things, guys. It was just unnatural. I saw things that I just had never seen on ice before, and it actually blew me away. I would think maybe if I had saw Jordan as a young player, you hear everybody talk about him. He's doing things at a level that just hasn't been seen before. A McDavid reel would be probably pretty impressive right now. I can't imagine. But then also, guys, I did see a highlight reel of Pelé, but Lionel Messi. I've seen Lionel Messi literally strip guys naked and go on to score. It's like he's here, and then he does something, and all of a sudden he teleports 10 feet. He's over there, and this guy's standing there going, "Where am I?" And Pele's going, or Messi's going on to. So there's all these great athletes, but I think a Messi reel, guys, I can't imagine. Jordan might be, in my mind, the only thing that could come close, but just magical stuff, right? Okay, that is awesome, because that kind of takes us full circle here to, and there's so many athletes, right? I mean, Jordan, Ali, I have Bolt, Gretzky, Serena, Federer, Messi, all these great athletes. But there's one Canadian guy I have to mention along the line of Phelps, right? There's this kid called, well, he's not a kid anymore, but his name is Michael Kingsbury, and he skis moguls. Okay, and if you're not familiar with that sport, great winter sport, but very, very demanding. When these guys go off the jumps in a mogul field, and these moguls are like the size of small cars for people who aren't familiar. These guys are, when they're at the height of their jumps inside that run, there are 3 stories in the air. And they come down and they ski out of it. If you get a chance to just Google Michael Kingsbury, listen, I don't think, even with Phelps's credentials, now those are Olympic, those are big leagues, I don't think there's anybody who's won more in their sport. And that would be the next question. Maybe we'll save that for the next roundtable, guys. Who's won more than anybody else? I'm not saying that Kingsbury has, but I'm kind of thinking there's nobody else in a sport that is dominated like Kingsbury. Listen, man. Just to give this, he's had 150 World Cup starts. Okay, 150 World Cup starts. He's podiumed 127 times. And he has 88 gold medals in the World Cup. Like, what? Like, this is crazy. 9 straight Crystal Globes. That's 9 consecutive years being the best skier in the world. And he's got 22 Crystal Globes already. And this guy's still skiing. So there's all these kind of obscure sports too. But Kingsbury, man, when you talk about the best of the best, this guy has dominated his sport. I don't know if anybody else has. That's a conversation for another day. So we'll wrap it up with this, guys. Okay. Appreciate your time today, boys. I've had a ton of fun, but let's wrap it up with this. The last question. We kind of talked about the best athletes, but if you guys were going to go, any athlete in any era, if you guys could plan a trip to see an athlete, who would you go to see? And I'll preface this because the Penguins were just in Edmonton playing the Oilers. I've always wanted to see Crosby play live. So my wife and I, we got tickets a couple years ago. He was injured. He wasn't there. And I was like a little kid, just totally deflated. I didn't get to see I didn't get to see him play live. So that got me thinking of, boy, if you could arrange a trip, guys, to see one athlete in the history of sport perform, who would it be, guys? Last question of the day.
That's a really good question. It might not be a very quick trip. Prime Mike Tyson, for one of those 45-second knockouts.
Wow.
It'd be an early night. He'd be probably home by 9 o'clock.
It would be an early night. You're right.
But when you talk about dominance, that stretch, I forget which actual years it was, say the late 80s to maybe the early 90s, what Tyson was doing was pretty much unbelievable. So I think that'd be a pretty fun time machine trip to go to see Prime Tyson.
Hey, would you pick Prime Tyson over Ali? I mean, Ali's on my list. So Tyson wasn't on my list, but you're right. Was anybody more dominant in that sport? I don't know, but would you see Tyson before Ali if I gave you the option?
Yeah, when you think about some of those Ali fights, we actually just passed the 50th anniversary of the Rumble in the Jungle, I think it was.
Yeah.
We just passed the 50th. So those fights, when you think about who he was going up against and the stories that all kind of went into it, yeah, but man, something about those Mike Tyson right hooks that would just knock a guy out before the food was delivered, really. Like, you'd order a pizza and the fight would be over before it comes downstairs. It would be close, but I just think about that impact of some of those punches. I think I would have to give Tyson a slight edge over Muhammad Ali. It's really close.
Love it. Lou, how about you?
Oh, so like the whole like get in a time machine to see one athlete thing is thrown me for a loop here a bit. But I'll tell you what. I'll bring it back and maybe I'll close it because I'm a big baseball guy, and I was lucky enough to see a lot of my favorite players as I grew up. But what I never ever got to see happen live was, can you imagine being in the park during the McGuire Sosa steroid race to 60? Like there was a series where they played each other. Like, I can't imagine being in the park during that time. I remember that was game changing for me because like so many other people, that race actually brought me back to baseball. Like, I was out. Like, it was so brutal with the strikes and I don't agree with the way that it happened and it went down, and we could, that's a whole nother show, but the energy and excitement around what was happening at that time, where every single time those two came up to the plate, there was a legit chance it was going out, and that was like riveting television.
Love it.
Yeah, those are good ones. I did actually write down Muhammad Ali. Tyson was there for me too, Mark, but I just the idea of watching the way Ali moved around the ring. Like, you can watch it on old videos that are choppy and blurry and stuff, but to see the speed in real time, I think would be unbelievable. So he's the one I wrote down. The other one that I would love to have I don't think anybody, like, I feel like nobody's ever seen him, but Jim Thorpe, like, we're going way back for him. But he
Yeah.
was like
right?
the guy that did everything, right? Olympic gold medalist in the NFL, pro baseball, pro basketball. I would love to just to see how dominant he was back then and how different it would be nowadays, obviously with all the sports science and stuff and how different it's changed. But just to see somebody that was that dominant at pretty much everything they did, I would love to see it.
That's a good one. He's on my list of greatest athletes of all time, of course,
Yeah.
right? Because what in those sports too, like how do you deal with that? So guys, I had a tough time here because there's so many great athletes. I would love to go back and see Babe Ruth just to see what that looked like way back in the day. I'd love to wear one of those hats and a sport coat to a game and be there at that era, just the era. I'd love to be there. But I think I'd love to see him. And of course, you have Ty Cobb, Majeau, all those guys back then. You think about Gordie Howe and some of the historic hockey players, football, you could go back and see some of the great quarterbacks that you'd like to go back and see. But I have to say, and we've talked about him already today, I've never saw him live, but because I do appreciate live performances. And I'll just wrap it up with this. And this is why I say this. My first trip down to the Blue Jays, I'd never seen a pro game before, right? And I went down as a guest strength coach, guys. And I've been working with, pretty elite athletes up here in Canada. But when I went to my first spring training as a young guest coach and saw professional players playing catch for the first time, I had to step back. I had to take a moment because it just looked so different. It was so fluid. It was so effortless. The power and the speed is kind of like being on the ice with an NHL skater. And I've been there too. I was literally just a pylon on the ice for those guys to skate around. Because listen to me, I got going this way. By the time, they transitioned the play, by the time I got turned around to go back, they were already coming back the other way. I remember catching a couple passes from these NHL guys, hitting my stick on the tape. I wasn't trying to get there. They just hit it, right? Pro athletes are so freaking incredible across the board. Doesn't matter what sport. But man, I would have loved to see Jordan in his prime. Game 5, maybe that Game 5 win in the 5th championship, where that epic. I would have loved to have been there for that epic picture where he is, flying high from the top of the free throw. I think Jordan would have been my guy personally to go see, because I think that would have been like seeing McDavid for the first time. Like, what is happening out there, right? So that would have been my pick. I think I have it written down as Jordan being my guy to actually go see play in his prime. Man, oh man, it's fun stuff.
There's no really wrong answers, right? I think every single name everyone has said, we'd all sign up to hop in a time machine to go see that. So
I love it, guys. Hey, listen, I want to thank you guys for your time today. This has been awesome. We're going to try to get this together, man. 3 of my favorite guys in all the sport that I've met over the years. So I want to thank you guys. Maybe closing, you guys, things you're watching in sport right now. Could be anything, but maybe let's wrap up with that from each of you, Marc. Is there anything you have your eye on in sport right now?
We're still in the middle of it. It's kind of wrapping up, but this is my favorite time of the sports calendar, when you have everything going. I know baseball just kind of wrapped up, but there's really kind of a big game on every single night if you want. And over the last few years, I've really started to embrace European football. Like, I'm a big soccer fan now. So following those schedules and seeing how that kind of works out. I've also become a really big college football fan as well. So that's a whole other show, the juggernaut of the NCAA and the changes that have been made to NIL and how some of these teams can recruit players, and how the dirty little secret is just kind of the dirty little secret is out open now. You can pay players. So what that means for some of these blue blood institutions, some of these smaller ones, it's been really fascinating to see the NIL get its fingerprints all over the NCAA right now.
Yeah, I'm still on a little bit of baseball hangover here for a minute, but this is usually the time where I officially turn the page and start watching NBA, start watching NHL officially, and that is until like the free agent season and MLB starts dominating my calendar once again. But I love this particular time. It's unreal. And hopefully Connor comes back with some kind of super ankle here, so that the Oilers can figure out a way to pick this thing up.
Love it.
Yeah, for me, it's a lot of NFL. Really kind of just doesn't matter who's playing, when they're playing, I'm watching. So I love this time of year. Like, the baseball thing has been great. The World Series is always fun. Man, I wish it would have stretched a little bit longer this year, but that happens. But yeah, I think for me, it's just NFL and slowly kind of getting back into hockey a little bit. It's weird coming off watching the playoffs last year, then trying to watch the regular season again, because I just feel like the gap between the levels of play is it's getting harder and harder for me each year to dial into regular season hockey. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, the thrill of the postseason, man. I get you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm on a baseball hangover right now too, guys, for sure. Listen, I've totally enjoyed this today, guys. I love this. Let's plan to do it again. And just a little preface, man. Um, we'll talk about, your bucket list sports. We'll talk about, the most winning athlete. We'll talk about the role of sports science in sport next time we come around. But maybe we'll try to set this roundtable up maybe 2 or 3 times a year just to talk sport. And again, the ultimate goal here is to share our thoughts and opinions, but also to give people context of what that high performance pro world really looks like. So many athletes that listen to the show, families are just starting their journey or just entering that high performance pathway. So these conversations are great just in terms of context. Appreciate all you guys, man. Thanks for coming on today, boys.
Thank you for the invite. This was a ton of fun.
Absolute delight. Great to see you guys.
Yeah, it was totally fun. Thanks, guys.
Okay, that was one great conversation with the guys. Man, I've been looking forward to this show for so long. As we were heading into fall, I was wondering, what could we do to really capture, this crossroad time in sport where, we have major sports going into their off season. We've got all these other sports heading into their seasons. One of my favorite times of the year, not just because everything's going on, but because you have athletes now stepping into their competitive seasons and other athletes stepping into their off seasons. It's such an incredible time. But in the spirit of getting everything in context, understanding the sporting landscape, if you have goals and objectives to achieve something, in the high performance world of sport, having that context is great. And sometimes these discussions can put things into perspective. And man, there were so many takeaways here. I got to, again, thank the guys for sharing their thoughts here, but I'd like to get some of your answers. So please write to me, info@jeffkrushel.com, or direct message me on social media. At Jeff Krush is the handle on most platforms. But I mean, like, for example, the time machine question. If there was one athlete you could go back to see, or if there's an athlete you could go see play today, who would it be? Who would be the athlete that you'd want to go see? For me, as I mentioned, Michael Jordan. Listen, he was entering pro sports when I was kind of entering pro sports as a sports science guy, strength and conditioning guy. So I was able to follow his career as much as possible. But keep in mind, back in those days, there were none of these, man. We didn't have the updates. We didn't have the social media. It was Sports Center in the evenings, getting the highlights, because honestly, I was too busy to watch any sports. But Michael Jordan has always been fascinating to me. How could one athlete impact so many people through sport? And, I shared with the guys this story of being in South Africa when Nelson Mandela passed away, and how unsure everybody was in terms of how the country would respond. Well, if you've seen Invictus or even some of the documentaries on Nelson Mandela and the whole story behind South Africa and trying to bring that country together, sport was a big part of that. And Nelson Mandela made rugby a big unifying focus for that country. The power of sport is sometimes humbling, right? Michael Jordan, I think, kind of was one of those guys, and there's superstars, right? There are superstars out there that kind of united everybody through sport. I mean, we just loved it. So, I never did get to see him play live, and I wish I would have. I wish I just would have seen it, So if there's an athlete you would like to see, I'd like to know who that is. But more importantly, some of the other conversations that we had about, where we're at in sport. Like, are we happy with the way things are trending? Are we on the right track in terms of player development and athlete development and the culture of sport, so to speak? So many great takeaways from this show. And coming up in the next few weeks, we're going to dive into some of the specific areas of athlete development. We're going to look at speed and power, strength, and how that athlete side contributes to the player performance side. Remember, I just love this whole world of athlete and player development. And I am a firm believer that we're missing the boat on so many different levels. We really need to spend more time long-term through the process of an athlete's life, developing that athlete so they can become better players. I firmly believe there's not a player, an athlete, that can't get better out there as long as we map out exactly where they're at and understand where they want to go. Sometimes that might just be injury prevention. Maybe it's not performance outcomes, right? Maybe it's just staying healthy long enough to really achieve true top potential. All these things come into play. We're also going to dive into the world of the Krush war on sugar. We're going to revisit some of the latest data out there, and it's not good. So we're just going to revisit that to get everybody back on track. There's also some really good things coming out of that world in terms of how we're fueling our athletes. So we're going to get back to nutrition, the war on sugar. We'll talk about supplements, and then we're also going to revisit the Krush brain game. Again, remember the theme for this season 18 of Krush Performance, is perception. We're going to get with Dr. Marc, neuropsychologist, and we're going to talk about the idea of perception, how we perceive ourselves, again, how we perceive where we're going in sport, and how we wrap that up to fine tune and map out our performance goals and objectives. So much fun. Much more to come on Krush Performance. Again, I got to thank Corey Graham, Marc, Majeau, and Moo for joining me today. I want to thank you guys for hanging out. I look forward to your comments. I'll see you next time. And remember, this is all part of the process when you're creating coachable players. I'm Jeff Kershell.